Hi, welcome to our presentation on abortions. More specifically, today we will be talking about the arguments for pro-choice and the arguments against pro-choice, with a few recommendations at the end. This presentation will be given by April Ludlow, Taylor Kern, and myself, Erin Kaufman. Today I'm going to start our presentation off talking about the arguments for pro-choice. My first argument is that women should be able to have the right to decide what they want to do with their bodies. As girls and women grow up in late adolescence and early adulthood, they face struggles with body image. And these struggles often are coupled with a higher risk of developing depression. So as one's body changes during the beginning of pregnancy, abortion is an outlet that should be available to them. My next argument is the argument of the human life versus the human person. The human life is any cell in your body that has human DNA. Some examples would be blood or body tissues. But as a fetus develops in the womb, it is solely relying on the nutrients that woman give them while they're being developed. Without these nutrients, the fetus cannot grow, develop, which means that the fetus is not a human person. Therefore, since it is not a human person, the idea of abortion should not be a morality issue. My next topic is the idea of intact dilation and extraction, also known as D&E. This idea is where the baby is birthed feet first, but the head is staying in the birth canal. And while the head's in the birth canal, surgical instruments are inserted into the skull and into the brain, essentially killing the brain and the baby. Most people that are pro-choice are actually against this. There are some exceptions to where they are for it. These exceptions could be when a woman cannot hold to full term their pregnancy because they could be at a health risk, or if a woman was impregnated from a rape. And lastly, if a fetus was diagnosed prenatally with a condition or abnormality that can affect its everyday living after it is birthed. Finally, I just want to talk about where in the Bible that the idea of pro-choice is said. My first example is in Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 28. This is where God entrusts Adam and Eve to populate the earth and make creation. This idea also means that God gave humans the right to decide what is respectful and humane procreation. My last example would be in Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 to 25. Here, God explains that if a woman who is pregnant was injured or caused harm to by another person, that person needs to give money or compensate the woman's husband. This means that the fetus or the baby is not a human person. It is a property. Next, we are going to have Taylor explain the arguments against abortion.
Hi, my name's Taylor, and I will be discussing the arguments existing against women's choice and access for abortion. So the first thing I would like to bring up is something that is stated within the Bible, and it comes from Proverbs 6:16 through 19, and it states, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush to evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. I wanted to start with this on my slide because it shows something that in the Bible, it shows how the Lord doesn't like the shed of innocent blood, which obviously killing at any point is wrong, but the killing of something that doesn't have the option to say or speak for itself, honestly, at this point is kind of one of those things that you can consider to be innocent blood. So I think in that, if you're looking at abortion at that standpoint, you're taking innocent blood away, and that's something that the Lord would probably detest. So we can look at it that direction. Another thing I would like to discuss is the development of embryo and fetus. So this is kind of where an embryo becomes a fetus. So once there's like conception, an embryo is formed, and then that embryo becomes the fetus. So heart development of an embryo starts at week 3. So 3 weeks after conception, there is a heartbeat, and it's not regular, it's irregular, but by week 4, that does become regular and it does even out. So to that degree, something with a heartbeat, obviously we all know is living, so we can fall back on that Bible verse of that being innocent blood shed. Another thing I would like to bring up is that weeks 9 through 12 with an embryo, that's when it becomes and starts to develop the fetus features and starts to get defining features of the parents. So 9 weeks in, a lot of the times, and this is where it kind of gets complicated, is most people don't know that they're pregnant until weeks 5 and 6. You might be lucky and catch it by week 3, but majority of the time, most women do not know that they're pregnant by this time, and by that time there is a heartbeat, so it would be considered an innocent being who has no say for what happens. Another thing I would like to bring up is that there's also adoption choices. So many people, many women all over the world suffer with infertility, and adoption is the only option for them. So for people like that, there are plenty of there are options to go through other than abortion. So instead of taking away innocent life and going against the Bible, people can go through with it. If there's someone who can't, a lot of people who get abortions are not in, they're with low income and they struggle and certain things like that, which I completely understand. But there's people who don't have that option to have children. So in that case, adoption is very helpful for them because some people do have that motherly instinct and they do want to have kids, they just simply can't. But all in all, although the choice of having an abortion is a personal decision, in America, half of unplanned pregnancies, which is a total of 1.3 million people each year, are ended in abortion. So that number in America is very high. So I can completely understand where abortion would be considered a wrongdoing, because 1.3 million pregnancies, and that probably doesn't include the numbers who probably maybe were twins in that set or triplets. I mean, it doesn't give that statistic of it, but we also have to look at it that sense that there could be multiple babies or fetuses within a womb when someone decides to get an abortion. So in that sense, I think it really just drives everything home of, with all the options that are being given to try to prevent pregnancy, like contraceptives and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there's tons of things out there, and we all know that at the end of the day, abstinence is the best thing in this case because mistakes do happen. But at the end of the day, you have to live with the mistakes you make, and sometimes you can't go back on things you do or say. So I believe that in this case, abortion would be wrong, and there's plenty of options that people could do, and there's plenty of valleys in which people could go with that. So with that, I'm going to give it to April, and she's going to discuss both the pros and cons and the support and denial of abortion and different opinions on it. Thank you.
So now we are moving on to the recommendations and whether or not to support or deny access to having an abortion. We decided to split it down the middle and do both categories of support and denial because this could go many different ways depending on the person and or couple who are considering either having an abortion or not having an abortion. So we will start with support and go from there. So we wanted to point out that sometimes things in life do not go the way we initially have planned them. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely have those moments in my life. So we thought about in terms of sometimes there are cases of rape and molestation that happen, whether it's by somebody they know, somebody off the street, a family member, anything like that, especially if it's in terms of a young child that could have possibly had that happen to them. They should be allowed to consider the fact that they should have an abortion. If it is incestual or something like that, sometimes kids cannot carry a child to full term without risk of losing their own life. They're just simply not built for that until a certain point in life, and they might not have hit that point in life yet. Another point would be the mother possibly losing her life or the child's life, or sometimes just both. Things can go wrong with pregnancy. Things cannot be fully formed, or there could be something missing. It could lead to both the mother and child being sick and losing both their lives, or simply just losing the mother's life. So that should be something that could be taken into consideration as well, and really thought through on why they should possibly have an abortion if that's the decision they decide to make. Another thing that should be in support of is timeframes. I know that sounds a little weird, a little controversial, but just hear me out. Timeframes as in it should be done before things are fully formed, before there are nerve endings, before there are, limbs formed, fingers, toes, things like that. Obviously, you shouldn't carry the child to full term and then obviously decide, I want to have an abortion. There should be time limits where you should be able to consider that, even in some cases with, say, as stated before, the mother possibly losing her life or risking losing her life to having the child. If it's within a certain time frame, then it should be okay. But again, there should be different options included with certain things that have happened in that person's life that could benefit them. As for the denial, we did just mention how it should be the size of essentially like an embryo in most cases. It should not be fully formed, so someone should not be able to walk up to a clinic and say, I would like to have an abortion, and they ask how far along are you, and you say, oh, I'm 8 months. That should not be up for consideration at that point. There are other options you could possibly look at where if you say you are not ready to have a child, then you are also just not ready, and there are options that can help you. Another thing to look at is mental health also goes a long way in this. So having those options sometimes is a lot easier than processing having an abortion done. So if you don't feel that's the right thing, then don't do it. It's completely up to you. Sometimes the right thing is not always going to feel like you're doing the right thing. Finally, there are other options, as stated before, such as adoption. I do know people personally who in my family have been adopted for different reasons, and it helped both their biological parents and them out in life. It should be considered. If you are not willing to be a parent or ready to be a parent at that stage, or even in cases of rape and things like that, you should be allowed to think about having someone else who might be ready to be a family or have a child be considered for adoption. They can also provide just as much love and care for that child as, say, you would when you are ready. There are many difficult things that do have to go into thinking about having an abortion or not having an abortion. It should be left up to those people, as again, it is their life, and sometimes the right decision is not always the easiest decision. So thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day.